More than 2,000 Ukrainian civilians have been killed in the Russia invasion so far. That's according to Ukraine's State Emergency Service, which says hospitals, houses, and kindergartens have been destroyed, and Russian troops have been steadily gaining ground on major cities, though that 40-mile Russian convoy outside Kyiv appears to be stalled. The UN General Assembly voted overwhelmingly today to condemn Russia for its actions, but such a vote comes with little action, and action is what Ukraine's president has been pleading for since the invasion began a week ago. Still, Joe Biden reiterated in last night's State of the Union address the U.S. will rely on sanctions and economic measures to try to stop Putin, not troops on the ground in Ukraine. But he made it clear there's a lot on the line in this war.
Throughout our history, we've learned this lesson. When dictators do not pay a price for their aggression, they cause more chaos. They keep moving.
I'm joined now by someone who was there, Congressman Jake Auchincloss of Newton, former Marine, served in Afghanistan, member of the House Subcommittee on National Security, International Development, and Monetary Policy. Congressman, good to see you again.
You as well.
You were here a couple of weeks ago. You said you praised the president for threatening sanctions, working with allies, organizing them, and offering aid. How do you feel about his performance 2 weeks later?
His performance has been superb vis-a-vis Ukraine. And his speech last night is going to be remembered against the context of this unprovoked, unjust invasion. He is rallying the free world in the manner that Americans expect their commander-in-chief to do. He is making clear that in the long run, this invasion is going to leave Russia weaker and America stronger. And he is also making clear that we can use diplomacy to keep a united front at a time when comprehensive coordinated sanctions are going to be the key to weakening the Kremlin.
I'm sure you will not be surprised to know virtually all of your Republican colleagues, including a governor from the Midwest last night who gave the response, disagrees. Here's Governor Kim Reynolds.
We shouldn't ignore what happened in the run-up to Putin's invasion, waiving sanctions on Russian pipelines while eliminating oil production here at home, focusing on political correctness rather than military readiness, reacting to world events instead of driving them. Weakness on the world stage has a cost, and the president's approach to foreign policy has consistently been too little, too late.
What's your response to the governor, Congressman?
It's difficult to even know where to start when the party of Donald Trump is saying that President Biden is too weak against Vladimir Putin. I mean, the irony is almost suffocating. We're talking about a guy whose performance in Helsinki in 2018 was called a disgrace by John McCain. President Biden did not levy those sanctions before the invasion because we needed them as a source of deterrence. And now that Vladimir Putin has seen that what the United States says it's going to do, we are going to do, he knows that when we say we will defend every inch of NATO territory, we mean it. And that is going to deter any armed conflict in Poland, Lithuania, Romania, and other Article 5 states.
Are the sanctions strong enough? I read this afternoon, as recently as the end of last year, we were still importing roughly 750,000 barrels of oil from Russia at the end of the year. I assume the number's roughly the same, and I assume the only reason we continue to do it is because politicians don't want to confront their constituents saying your sacrifice by paying more at the pump is nowhere near the sacrifice these men and women are making in Ukraine, so we've just got to deal with it. Am I wrong?
No, and I agree with you, and I've been very clear on this front that while Putin has sustained body blows with financial and technical sanctions and with the lethal and humanitarian aid to Ukraine, he hasn't yet taken a roundhouse to the face, and that is the energy sanctions. We have got to immediately embargo coal exports from Russia, and working with our OPEC and European allies, we need to sanction oil and natural gas. It's one, going to turbocharge our own transition to a clean energy future, and two, it's going to demonstrate in the clearest possible terms that the free world is with Ukraine.
So why isn't Biden doing it?
Biden needs to work with and through our allies. To date, our strength has been our unity across the United States and Europe. And while the United States could withstand volatility in the energy markets, vis-a-vis Russian oil and natural gas, our European allies are tremendously dependent, especially on natural gas. And he is working thoughtfully and diplomatically to get us to a position where we could credibly threaten those sanctions. I understand what he's trying to do. I feel like we should be moving faster and stronger, but he's got to deal with the constraints of realpolitik.
Congressman, you said a minute ago about what you thought the impact in the long run of these tough sanctions would be, things like that. What if there's not a long run? I mean, a term that I'm using but cannot stand is, and you know it from your prior life, military experts talk about possible decapitation of President Zelensky, meaning removal of the government and replacement by puppets. Others are talking about the possibility of some even limited nuclear action. Obviously, Putin threatened it. There could possibly be, if Zelensky was removed, continued assaults, killings of civilians. Do we continue to sit by our televisions and say how courageous the Ukrainians are and just keep doing sanctions, stay the course, and that's it?
Well, first, I want to complicate your premise that somehow all America is doing is sitting by our televisions. We have levied the most comprehensive and coordinated repercussions for Vladimir Putin in the history of the modern era. We are going to cripple the Russian economy. The ruble has been destroyed. They are not going to be able to support their military-industrial complex, their maritime or avionics complexes. Russia is in severe trouble right now. So this has been a significant response. Those who are saying that we should do more, other than energy, my retort would be, well, what are you talking about really? Are you talking about military action?
Well, I'm asking, that's what I'm asking you, if I may. I'm asking you, if the circumstances change, despite the crippling nature, to use your term, of the sanctions, let's assume despite those and the long-term impact on the economy and possibly the rule of Putin, that Zelensky is decapitated, that the people of Ukraine, as courageous as they are, continue to be assaulted and murdered by the Russians. What do we do then? I don't have an answer. I don't want to see troops on the ground either. I assume most Americans don't. But can you imagine turning on your television tonight and seeing a puppet in office and Ukrainians being bombed by the Russians and saying we're just going to stay the course on sanctions?
Vladimir Putin is going to learn the hard way that wars are simple to start and they're a nightmare to end. And what we're going to see over the medium term is, one, a highly resolved and effective insurgency in Ukraine that is going to be armed by the West and is going to be reinforced by Western sanctions. And two, a declining standard of living in Russia that erodes his base of support. And the two of those things together are going to be a pincer movement on his credibility. I can't predict the future. Nobody can. But we are going to be able to create a morass for him in Ukraine that I think is going to be a significant deterrent to any further action.
Sort of like what we faced in Iraq when we thought we would be greeted the celebration, or at least our government thought would be greeted by celebration, I would assume. Congressman, can I broach a couple of things that were not mentioned last night? Were you disturbed by the fact that other than 500,000 charging stations, there was no mention of arguably the greatest existential threat to our planet, climate change, by the president?
I watched with interest and read with interest this morning Senator Manchin's response to the president's domestic agenda outlined last night, which was to say Senator Manchin would support Medicare negotiation of drug prices and higher taxes to fund increased investments in clean energy. I'm with Elizabeth Warren. I think that's a good deal, and we should be pursuing that vigorously, because clean energy investments have massive impacts on our, not just the United States, but the global carbon footprint.
How about Biden essentially not touching the topic last night, Congressman?
President Biden campaigned on the topic, and he spent a year's worth of political capital on the topic. I don't think it's really fair to question where his views and where his policy are. He put forward specific action items with the Build Back Better agenda. It stalled out. We're restarting those talks now. And Senator Manchin has been clear that climate is on the agenda. So I'm actually optimistic that we can make movement on clean energy here.
Build Back Better, as of last night, is not called Build Back Better. As you know, it's called Lower Costs and Lower the Deficit. If some critical elements of that are not law by the midterms, should the Democrats pay a price for that?
I think we're going to be judged as a party on whether we are putting COVID behind us. People feel like they are living their normal lives, whether we have a strong economy ahead of us, and whether we're protecting democracy at home and abroad. Those are the three big pillars that Americans need to feel Democrats are delivering on. 9 months is an eternity in politics. There are upward trends in all three of those fronts, and I still feel confident about our chances in the midterms.
Before you go, I was thinking while I'm watching the speech last night at a particular moment about all of you who have served in the military prior to your service in Congress. When that fool, that congresswoman from Colorado, got up when the president was talking about soldiers who died following exposure to these massive burn pits, and she stands up and yells and heckles him. What was your reaction to that, Congressman?
She's an embarrassment. And it angers me that Americans perceive her, because of her outsized visibility on cable news and social media, as somehow representative of members of Congress generally. She's not. She's an outlier. She's a joke. And we, as members of Congress, owe it to our constituents and to ourselves and to the institution to exhibit much higher levels of decorum and collegiality than she displayed.
Well, exhibiting much higher levels of decorum is not that hard in her case. Jake Auchincloss, thank you much for your time. I appreciate it as always.
Take care.